versions about positional scarcity. And just for those of you who are newer to fantasy baseball, what that means is there's just not as many good catchers, shortstops, second basemen as there are outfielders and first basemen for obvious reasons. It's a lot easier to play those positions in real life, and so you don't need to be you can be a great hitter and be limited in the field, whereas the higher, more highly skilled positions, obviously, fewer players can play them, and therefore there's fewer good hitters. The pool is smaller of good hitters to draw from.
Right.
And so a lot of people I know, Glenn Colton, Rick Wolf. I just played Glenn Colton in paddle tennis yesterday. Those guys are big.
With that?
I lost 6-4 and then won 6-4. I played pretty well. He's good. Right. And then we got crushed in doubles by these older people that were like really good, and they asked us for our names after getting crushed, and Glenn said Jeff Erickson. So there may be some people talking yang about your doubles game. But anyway, so those guys really believe in positional scarcity, and they'll go after Robbie Cano for a big bid. I think you and I agree. I don't. I think that yes, all things being equal, I'm going to take the second baseman over the outfielder for the same stats. But I am not going to sacrifice a lot of stats just to get a player at a more scarce position, except in a very shallow league. And by shallow, I mean 8-team mixed league. Suddenly that really matters. But in a regular 14-team mixed league, or especially an AL only or NL only league, I don't really care what position the guy plays.
See, I go back and forth on that one because I did spend on Cano last year in Tout Wars, and I think I got a good investment out of him too. But then again, I spent the same on Pedroia and Labor, and it blew up in my face. So obviously there's different results. You don't want to be results oriented. Sometimes I feel like in the only universes, there's such a big drop off that maybe it's worth it sometimes to do that. But when you have to have 5 outfielders, hey, a fourth and fifth outfielder pool is pretty grim when you're looking at these only leagues. Although it's going to be interesting to see what happens, like say an AL Tout, AL Labor this year. You add that extra team. Granted, it's the Astros. There's not that many options, but you add Jason Maxwell, you add Jose Altuve to that pool. It changes things a little bit there. I tend to agree with you on this, and I've been doing this more and more lately. This year in particular, is I've been de-emphasizing positional scarcity. See that in my rankings and my projections too. I'm not getting Reyes or Hanley Ramirez for sure, or Pedroia really, or even Kinsler in any of these leagues because they're going in the early second round, and I'm just not willing to pay that price for these guys.
Yeah, I want the homers, I want the steals, I want the batting average and runs. I'm not going to worry about, what am I going to do at second base? What am I going to do at shortstop? If I go through my entire draft and I have a hole at second or a hole at short, okay, that's my project for the season. I'll try to fill in, mix and match, get a hot prospect that got called up for a month. If Jurickson Profar wins a job in the middle infield, maybe I end up with him.
Right.
Billy Hamilton gets called up, maybe I end up with him. Whoever I can, mix and match, and as long as I have, 4 or 5 outfielders really producing, good pitching staff, I feel like I'm going to have my numbers, and I'm going to have to get something out of those middle positions. You can't just punt, but by punting at the draft doesn't mean I'm punting for the season, and I'm going to try to make up. I'm going to try to get an edge each round in terms of the production for my team by passing on, I've got to get the last decent second baseman of this tier. I'm just going to let other people sort of pay a premium for that. I'm going to get more numbers than them at other positions, and then I'll go and try to catch up during the season.
Right, and I just did a mock today. It was a 15-team mixed league, so it's basically NFBC style. We did it on Derek and Kevin Payne were hosting the show on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, and I just took part in that draft. And I took pitchers early in this one. I took Verlander in the second. I took Cliff Lee in the fourth. So by right then and there, I pretty much had to avoid positional scarcity. If there was a catcher that was a value, I thought I could take him. I did take Mauer, I think, in the sixth, and I thought that was decent value still. But I found myself short on middle infielders. But those middle rounds, there's plenty of those guys that are positive value middle infielders, and you got to get value from all of your slots anyhow. And then I was able to add Billy Hamilton in the 21st round as my first reserve. That's fine with that. I'll take that chance. And if he gets called up in June, I've got a huge profit.
Right. In a mixed league, if you have Billy Hamilton for 3 or 4 months, there's 50 steals right there, and you'll still have 2 or 3 months of some other middle infielder who probably gets you, 9 or 10 steals and 5 or 6 homers. So now you add that to whatever Hamilton's going to do in half a season, and you've got a huge production. You've got 60, 70 steals out of a middle infield slot plus whatever runs and ribbies the other guy you had for half a season. Let's say you have J.J. Hardy for 2-3 months, and you add that for half a season at Hamilton. That's going to add up to a very valuable season. Now, of course, Hamilton may not get called up till September, and
Right.
Then it's a different story. But so then if it doesn't look good for him, you can drop him. You can mix and match with other players. There's going to be, I said Profar might be a guy that gets called up at some point and gets regular bats, and he could be your guy, or somebody who emerges who we don't know is good yet.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you're getting, non-scarce. You're getting from non-scarce position picks earlier. You're getting more raw value, just real production from these guys, greater counting stats. Period. That you can try to make up with the lesser positions. And that's one of the things you can learn about that. And I've also found, like, when I've run the numbers every year, if I'm going to have a boost in dollar values in terms of positional scarcity, it's going to be when there's not enough positive value about guys to begin with. And that's why we do it with catchers. Usually there's about 12 catchers in a 24 in a 2-catcher environment, by the way. Only about 12 to 15 catchers that are going to earn positive dollar values. So in that case, you have to give them a bump up, because otherwise you're not going to have enough catchers to fill the pool. So, and what it does, though, is it lowers the value of other positions a little bit too. So you have the same amount of dollars in the pool. You got to make sure you do that.
Yeah, I think there's 2 exceptions to the just forget about scarcity rule. Just take the best players and worry about the rest later. I think they're catchers and closers. Okay, those 2 are a little different. Closers are the only position that gets you saves. It's the only one. Okay, I don't care how good Clayton Kershaw is, he's not going to get you saves. Okay, it's not like that on offense, right? If you have a 5-category player who's an outfielder, he gets you everything. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have no catchers or negative catchers, you're still going to get whatever you get from your 5-category outfielder. But if you have no closers, Clayton Kershaw, Justin Verlander, and whatever other pitch you get are not going to help you in saves. So that's an issue. That's a different issue. It's the only category. It's the only position that gets a certain category. Catchers are scarce for the reason you said, and they really are sort of the opposite of that, where they're a negative to batting average if you wait. They either get you a total 0 in production, or they get you home runs and RBI, but they are a huge negative in batting average. So I also tend to leap a little bit with catchers, because I don't think you can afford to take on a 220 batting average for the season, even if it's only in 420 at-bats, or completely get a 0 at the position. I think that you want 2 guys. They don't have to be the top guys, but you want a Salvador Perez, a Jonathan Lucroy, a couple guys like that who you just feel, they're just going to contribute and they're not going to hurt me.
Yeah, Victor Martinez is always one of those guys too. Let me ask you this, though, and I know the answer. It's a weighted question here, but when are you going to draft Buster Posey? Are you going to be able to take – you're not going to take him in the first round. What's the earliest you're willing to take him?
It's funny. I just did this all-time article, the best catcher, the best sort of all-time fantasy teams, and I went through it. And, Posey does not – I don't think he makes the top 3 all-time teams, but he definitely makes this teens, I did it by decade also. So from 2010 to 12, it's the shortest decade, obviously. It's 3 years that we have. He makes, he's the top catcher in the last 3 years. And if you look at it, and then you compare him to like where he, lists all time, he's not even that high up. I mean,
he's not Piazza.
He's not like 6 of Piazza seasons,
Right.
And so it's like, how much is he really giving you? I mean, he's scoring like 80-something runs, not a lot of runs. The average is nice, but even with his first base eligibility, it's going to be in far less at bats than your normal batting, your Miguel Cabreras and your other batting average leaders. And the home runs in that park are just, it's going to be tough for him to come by, 30, 35 home runs in that park, especially not playing, 100, 150 games. So I'm not going to draft him in the first round. Mid-second, I think about it. Late second, I think about it strongly in a 2-catcher league.
Yeah.
It just would depend what else was left. I'd have to say, is it Posey or is it Strasburg? I'm going to take Strasburg. But those guys are gone. Posey or Harper? I'm going to take Harper. But if all those guys are gone and it's Posey or Josh Hamilton, I may take Posey.
Right, I could see that. I had the choice. I had the 20th pick. But fortunately, I had one of my guys still available. I had Posey or Justin Verlander. I'm going to take Justin Verlander. I know there's some concern about the swing and miss rate going down, and especially in the playoffs. But I think I'm going to. I still think that the pure number of innings I'm going to get with the great whip, the great ratios, hard to pass that up.
Yeah, I would probably take Verlander ahead of Posey. Although I don't love AL pitchers.
I don't either.
It's just a little bit of just something you don't want in your first 2 rounds, an AL pitcher if possible. If it's Pedro Martinez in 1999, okay, fine. But pretty much, there's nobody like that. And Verlander's as close as it comes in this era, the last few years. All right, I want to go back to closers, though, because I think closer runs, especially in these NFBC leagues, the high-stakes league that Greg runs at Stats, that are just great high-stakes leagues to be in. there's no trading allowed for obvious reasons. They don't want to have a bunch of lawsuits where for the $100,000 prize some sketchy trades went down. In these no trade leagues, it's a little bit more urgent to get closers. I mean, in a trade league like my home league, I sometimes will take 9 starters because I don't care when I get my saves. I need to get my saves. Only closers get you saves, and I need saves. I don't think I'm going to win the league with a 1 in any category. So I need.
Although I've done it before. I've won a 4x4 league with 1 in saves. Right. You can do it, but it's just you have to really hit on all your starters though.
Everything else, and everybody has to be competitive usually. There's a lot of quitters in the bottom half of leagues as the season goes on and their teams aren't good, and so that other teams pick up points when the bottom feeders quit. Not bottom feeders, they're the bottom prey. They're the fed upon. When they quit, other people pick up a lot of points, and if you have a 1 in a category, it's tough to beat a team that's strong across the board, especially in a 15-team league where it's 1 versus 15 rather than 1 versus 12. Okay, so I don't like to tank saves, but in that league, I will, if the closers are too expensive, go 9 starters, and halfway through the year have a huge lead in wins and strikeouts with still decent ratios, and that one doesn't even have whip, so you're not even taking that much of a chance. And then in July, I'll trade 3 or 4 starters for 4 closers. It doesn't matter when you get your numbers. I can get all my saves in the second half. I can start 5 closers in August. It doesn't matter when I'm getting them. It just matters that I get them. So in a trade league, you don't have to take a closer if you feel again like the value you're giving up too much value with starters or other offensive players. But in a non-trade league, you have to get the closers. You can get a Rafael Soriano off the waivers. You can get a Fernando Rodney, but you can't count on that. I mean, there's other people bidding on those guys too. So to me, I think closers are the one area where I'm going to jump in, even though I know this guy might not be worth as much as a guy in another position. I'm going to jump in and be a little bit more aggressive around 9, around 10, around 11, and I'm going to take some guys earlier than I'd like to.
How many closers do you really trust? That's the other question. That's the follow-up to that, because that helps dictates when you'd make that leap. How many of them do you trust?
I haven't numbered it, and I'd like to do a study on whether you trusting the guy. Like, go and check off the guys you trust, and go look at the end of the season which guys actually kept the job. It might not match. You know what I mean? Right. So, like, one sense of trust may not be the best indication okay.
Fair enough.
But you got to go by something, though, right? So you subjectively trust these guys, and you're gonna, for what it's worth, you're gonna try.
But that ties into you saying though that you're willing to go early on these guys. Well, who are you willing to go early on?
Right.
I know there's Mariano, Nathan. You are always willing to go early on them.
Right.
What about Kimbrel?
Forget about of course Kimbrel and Papelbon and those guys, but I'm not going to go early enough to get them. In other words, there's somebody else who's going to like them more than me, and I don't care. I'm not looking to get the extra strikeouts from Kimbrel. If I get him, great. I just want a guy who's going to keep his job, get 35, 40 saves. That's all I want. If he gets me strikeouts, great. I'm not going to reach 2 extra, 3 extra rounds to get Kimbrel over Rivera. Doesn't matter to me that much. Nathan Rivera, as you said, a guy I like that people hate is Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee just signed a big contract, okay? Brandon Lee has gotten it done, except for last year his walk rate spiked, and then he was better on the Dodgers, though the walks were still high, but he has the contract. To me, the contract is more important than the skills with a closer, because if you think about a guy without a contract, or without any sort of investment in him by the team, he's got 1 or 2 blown saves to keep the job. He may have great skills, but no matter how good you are, in a short sample, with a 1-inning sample, you can easily get blown up once or twice and lose the job. If you have a contract, even if your skills are a little bit lesser, you've got 4 or 5 chances to keep the job before you get removed or you blow up. It was like Heath Bell last year had like 12 chances and blew all 12 of them. But at least, like, in principle, he was a great bet because...
Except for that 1 week where nobody had him active and he had 4 saves. That was awesome. That was great because I didn't own him anywhere.
It was 5 saves. Yeah,
it was 5. Excuse me. But let me ask you that. Okay, I think the one exception to your thing is, what about like a team like the Dodgers, though? They're a devil may care thing about their salaries. They're less tied to that contract than, say, just throwing out a name, like the Royals. Say they had signed their closer to a 3-year deal. They're sticking with them come hell or high water. The Dodgers, they got to win this year. They got to win. They've invested a lot of money. They don't really care, if it's, they're preserving the guy's value. They got to get the guy that gets the job done, period.
I think that's a good point with Lee. That's a fair point, that they're not going to be as invested, though still the GM, he made a call. He signed the guy for probably way more than market value.
They sunk the Juan Uribe cost pretty quickly.
Well, was that even the same regime, though, that did the Juan Uribe deal?
Ned Colletti, yeah. He's been the GM the whole time. I mean, it's different owner, but it's always the same GM signing all these bad contracts.
Yeah, so at the time you signed the contract, they weren't as free spending. In fact, they had financial problems. Now they don't. It's a little bit easier right now. I don't know, but that is a good point. That with League, who I seem to trust a little more, because it's not that hard to close. It's a good environment to be in. I think he'll be fine. But that you're right, that if there's any team that's going to say, well, we pay this money and, screw it, it's probably the Dodgers who would be quick to kick him to the curb. But I still think it's a big point in his favor that they're not going to easily. I
don't disagree. And I agree with the general point, too. I do think contract does dictate chances. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, exactly. And Heath Bell, it was it totally bore out. It was just, if you're so bad, there's nothing you can do.
The theory was right. The player was wrong.
Right. It was just so wrong. But I would take a league average pitcher with, 5 chances to blow it rather than an above average pitcher with 2 chances to blow it. It's just
the Francisco Cordero thing, Todd Jones, all these things throughout the last 15 years. Yeah, we've seen that a lot, especially as closers have gotten more and more expensive.
Right. So, Ron Chandler always says draft skills, not roles. Totally agree, except with closers. Draft roles and then evaluate the chance that the guy keeps his role, which is a base of skill and, team loyalty, pedigree, investment. That's a whole other calculation you have to make. Every other position is mostly, if he's in the lineup, has a chance to get in the lineup, take the skills.
All right. Very good. Why don't we wrap this baby up? Because we got this is a good one. First Google Hangout telecast. I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, we'll see how it looks. That's always the question. And sounds, if it actually works. But, appreciate your chatting, Jeff, and let's do it again soon.
All right.